The night was quiet, almost too quiet. On a warship that cut through the endless dark of space, silence never felt like peace. It felt like the breath before a scream. It felt like the moment before alarms tore you from sleep and forced you into fire. He lay on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the pounding in his head to settle. His body begged for rest, but his mind refused to let him go. He had fought too many battles, seen too many faces vanish from life in the blink of an eye. The quiet made those faces return. The quiet made him remember. He turned onto his side, pulling the thin sheet up around his shoulders. The air recycler hummed in the corner, blowing a steady stream of cold, filtered air across the room. The light strip above the door glowed red in night mode. It was supposed to make the quarters feel calm, but instead it bathed everything in the color of blood. He hated it, but he didn't have the strength to argue with it tonight. And then, it happened. The soft hiss of a door sliding open broke the silence. His eyes opened instantly, his breath caught. For a moment he thought it was the alarms, the sudden rush of soldiers pouring in to drag him to another battle. His heart raced, but no sound followed. No sirens, no footsteps of a squad, only the faint whine of the automatic door opening slowly, almost reluctantly, as if someone was afraid to be heard. He didn't move. He lay still, watching the crack widen as shadows spilled into the room. His first thought was enemy. His second thought was death. After all, this was war, and death often came quietly when no one was watching. The figure stepped inside, small, slim, moving without a sound. The door closed behind them with a whisper, sealing them together in the dim red glow. His chest tightened. He didn't reach for the weapon hidden under his bunk. He should have. Every training instinct told him to react, to fight, to kill before being killed. But something deep, something instinctive, stopped him. The figure stood there in silence, breathing, watching. The room smelled faintly different now, a trace of something unfamiliar, sharp yet strangely soft. Alien. Not human. He realized slowly who it must be. Her. He had seen her on the lower decks before, in the shadows where captured enemies were kept until they were exchanged or interrogated. She was not like the others. She never shouted, never resisted. Her eyes had followed him once, just once, when he walked past. Eyes not filled with hate, but with something else, something he had not been able to name. And now, here she was. In his room. He pushed himself up on one elbow. His throat felt dry, words refused to come. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to ask how she had escaped. He wanted to demand answers, but all he did was stare. She moved closer, still without sound. The soft fabric around her shoulders slipped away, falling to the floor in a muted whisper. It was not a weapon she carried. It was not armor she wore. Piece by piece she began to shed the layers that separated her from him. Cloth, metal, strange curved plates of alien alloy. All dropped gently to the ground, one after another, until the only sound in the room was the soft beat of his heart. He should have stopped her. He should have shouted for the guards. He should have remembered the orders. Her kind is the enemy. Her kind cannot be trusted. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because in that moment, she was not the enemy. She was not a soldier. She was not an alien. She was just someone standing in the red glow of his room, trembling in the silence, leaving behind everything that weighed her down. And when she moved toward his bunk, he found he could not breathe. She reached the edge of his bed. She did not speak. She did not ask. She simply lifted the thin sheet and slipped beneath it, pressing close as though she had always belonged there. His world, which had been endless noise and endless war, shrank into the warmth of her body beside his. The door had opened, and with it, something else inside him had opened too. Something he thought the war had buried forever. Something fragile. Something dangerous. Something human. For a long moment, he did not move. He simply watched as she stood at the side of his bunk, half hidden in the dim red glow. The sheet clung to his chest where his hand gripped it, but he felt powerless to raise it in defense. He wasn't a man who was easily caught off guard. Years of battle had burned that weakness out of him. Yet now, with this silent figure before him, he was frozen. The first sound came like a whisper of surrender. A soft thud as fabric touched the floor. Her outer robe, or something like it, slid down her shoulders and pooled around her feet. In the half-light, it looked more like shadow than cloth. She didn't meet his eyes. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze was far away, lost, as though her mind stood on another battlefield he could not see. Then came the click, a sharp, metallic sound as the first piece of armor dropped beside the cloth. Alien alloy, curved and strange, nothing like human design. He had seen her people fight in it before, saw how it gleamed with terrible beauty under the fire of plasma weapons. Now it looked small, broken, useless. Piece by piece, she let it fall. Each sound echoed louder than the last in the silence of the room. Clink, clatter, thud. The rhythm felt almost ritualistic, as if every discarded piece was a confession, a prayer, or maybe even an apology. He wanted to speak. He wanted to ask her why she was doing this, why she had come to him of all people, why she shed her layers as though standing at some altar of judgment, but his voice stayed buried in his throat. Something about the gravity of the moment pressed against him, commanding silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she undid the fastenings on her chest plate. She moved slowly, carefully, as though afraid the sound would break the fragile stillness between them. And when it fell, when the alien metal joined the growing pile at her feet, he felt the air in the room change. Lighter, warmer, more human. It struck him then that she wasn't just undressing. She was disarming herself. She was letting go of everything that gave her power, everything that could protect her. Before him, an enemy soldier, she was stripping away the only barriers she had left. That was no small act. That was something raw, something dangerous. He could hear her breathing now. Shallow, uneven. Not the controlled rhythm of a soldier, but the fragile stutter of someone on the edge of breaking. She wasn't just tired, she was exhausted, body and soul. The kind of exhaustion no rest could fix. The kind of exhaustion that came when you had carried too much for too long. He thought of the war, the orders, the voices of his commanders, reminding him again and again, her kind will never stop. They are built for war. They do not feel as we do. They will not surrender. And yet, here she was, surrendering, not to his weapon, not to his command, but to something deeper, something unspoken. She let the last of her armor slide from her hands, and then she stood there, bare in the red glow, with nothing but her silence and the tremor of her breath. For the first time since she had entered, she looked at him. Her eyes met his. They were not the cold, sharp eyes of a warrior anymore. They were softer, wide and uncertain, carrying the weight of too many scars. He had seen men stare into death with less fear than what he saw in her gaze now. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of trust. And she had chosen to trust him. He didn't know why. He didn't know what had driven her to his door, why she had slipped past guards and censors, why she had chosen his room instead of anyone else's. But in that moment, the why didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that she was here unarmed, vulnerable, asking for something without words. He lowered his hand from the sheet, not all the way, just enough to show her he would not push her away. The silence stretched between them, long and fragile, like a thread of glass. And then, with slow steps, she crossed the final distance and reached for the bed. The pile of clothes and armor lay forgotten on the floor, scattered like the remains of some broken past. What she carried with her now was something else entirely. Something more dangerous than a weapon. Something more human than an order. She did not speak. She did not ask. She simply lifted the edge of his blanket and slid beneath it, as if the act itself was the only language she had left. He froze. Her body was close now, closer than he ever imagined possible. He could feel the faint heat of her skin against his arm, the small tremor in her frame. She was shaking, not from cold, not from weakness. This was the trembling of someone holding back too much for too long. He had seen that tremble before, on humans, on comrades, on friends, who broke down after battles when no one else was watching, but never, not once had he imagined seeing it in her. For years, the war had told him her kind were heartless, that they were born for violence, forged in fire and sharpened into weapons. He had seen them fight. He had seen them kill without hesitation, without pause, as though mercy was a word their language never learned. And yet here she was, lying inches away, her body betraying every wall of control. Her breath was uneven, quick, shallow, almost frantic. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't resting. She was holding on, clutching the silence like it was the last fragile thing left to her. He wanted to move, to comfort. But his own hand felt heavy, weighed down by fear, not of her, but of himself. What right did he have to offer comfort to the enemy? What right did he have to see her like this, when men he had fought beside never got the chance to show their own weakness before death claimed them? He lay there listening. Every inhale, every exhale. Each one pulled at something inside him, a place he had buried deep, where his humanity had gone quiet under the endless noise of war. Minutes passed, though they felt longer. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them dared to break what little peace this moment gave. The sheets between them were thin, but they felt like a wall, one that could vanish with a single choice. Finally, his hand twitched. Small, hesitant. He let it slide across the sheet until it hovered near her shoulder. He did not touch her yet. He only let the warmth of his presence brush against her, letting her know he was there, that he hadn't turned away. She stiffened. The trembling grew sharper for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, carefully, she relaxed. The tension in her shoulders faded, her body sinking into the mattress, into the sheets they now shared. It was as if his nearness had told her something words never could. You are not alone. The silence between them shifted. It was no longer empty, no longer heavy with suspicion. It was fragile, yes, but it was alive. Her breathing steadied, not fully calm, but calmer than before. Still, she did not speak. Perhaps she had no words. Perhaps words would have ruined what this moment meant. And so he let the silence remain. He watched the faint glow of the red light trace across her face, softening features he had once thought terrifying. She didn't look like a monster now. She didn't look like a soldier. She looked tired, wounded in ways deeper than any blade or bullet could reach. Something inside him shifted. The war had always painted things in black and white. Us versus them, life versus death, victory versus extinction. But here, in this narrow bunk, the lines blurred. She wasn't a faceless enemy anymore. She was a person, a life, and for reasons he couldn't name, she had chosen him to trust in this moment. His hand finally lowered, resting lightly on her shoulder. Not to claim, not to command, just to say, I am here. Her body trembled once more. But this time it wasn't the trembling of fear. It was the trembling of someone letting go, of someone finally allowing themselves to breathe. The sheets wrapped around them both, thin and simple, yet suddenly heavier than any armor. They weren't just fabric now. They were shelter. They were a fragile promise. Outside, beyond the walls. The war raged on. Ships tore through the dark, soldiers bled into the void, and hatred fueled fire across the stars. But here, beneath these sheets, two enemies lay in silence, bound not by orders or weapons, but by something far more dangerous. Trust. And as the hum of the ship carried them deeper into the night, he realized the truth that unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. This was no longer about war. This was about being human. The ship shook. It began as a low vibration, a shiver running through the walls, but soon it grew into a steady rumble that made the bunk tremble beneath them. Somewhere outside, weapons were firing. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, another battle had begun. He did not move. Neither did she. They lay in silence beneath the thin sheet, the sound of distant war pressing against the fragile peace they had found. He could feel her body stiffen again, the calm she had begun to find slipping away with every thud that echoed through the hull. For a moment, he wanted to tell her it was fine, that they were safe. But the words would have been lies. They were never safe. Not on this ship, not in this war, not in a universe that demanded blood to keep moving forward. His mind returned to the orders. Her kind is the enemy. Her kind will not stop until we are gone. Those words had been repeated so often that they felt carved into his bones. He had lived by them, killed by them, survived by them. But now, lying beside her, he felt the weight of those words like chains around his chest. The vibrations grew louder. He knew the sound too well, the distant thunder of cannons, the muffled cries of shields being torn apart. Somewhere on this ship, men and women he knew were fighting, bleeding, dying, his people, humans. And yet, the alien lying beside him was trembling in the same rhythm as he was. Her breaths came short, sharp, uneven, just as his own once did after battles that ended in smoke and screams. He realized something that unsettled him. They were not so different. Her kind had been painted as monsters. But did monsters shake when the guns began to roar? Did monsters crawl beneath sheets searching for warmth and silence in the middle of chaos? Did monsters carry fear in their eyes, the same fear he had seen in his own reflection too many times? No, monsters did not. People did. She was a person, and war had tried to take that truth away from him. The ship shook again, harder this time, and he instinctively reached for her shoulder. His grip was steady, firm, reassuring. She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his in the red glow of the room. There was no language between them, no words to explain what this moment meant. But the look she gave him told him everything. She was scared, just like him. She didn't want to die. She didn't want the fire and noise to claim her. She wanted something simple, something human. He pulled her closer. Not out of desire, not out of instinct, but out of something deeper, something older than war. She melted into his embrace. The trembling slowed. Her breathing softened. The war outside raged on, but here in his room, in this fragile cocoon of warmth, they had created a silence stronger than the roar of cannons. For the first time, he thought of the war differently. He had always fought to protect humanity, to ensure his people would survive. But lying there, with her clinging to him as though he were the only safe thing in the universe, he realized there was more to fight for. It wasn't just survival. It was moments like this. It was proof that even in the darkest corners of war, life still reached out for life. That even across species, across hatred, across endless killing, there was something that refused to die. The need for connection. The alarms outside screamed. The ship shuddered under another strike. Somewhere far away, death claimed more names. But here, under the thin blanket, two enemies lay together, united not by orders or strategy, but by fear and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they were not so different after all. And as the war pressed closer, he tightened his hold on her and whispered the only truth he could manage. Words so quiet that maybe only he believed them. We are still alive. Her trembling stilled. She closed her eyes, and for one fragile moment the war outside could not touch them. The battle outside rumbled like distant thunder, but inside his quarters there was only the quiet sound of two people breathing. The sheet covered them both, thin and fragile, but it felt heavier than any armor he had ever worn. She lay against him, her body trembling again, not violently but in small uneven waves. Each tremor passed into him, each one a silent cry he could feel but not hear. He had seen soldiers shake like this after battles. He had seen men with strong arms and hard eyes collapse when the fight was over, their bodies refusing to hold in the fear any longer. He knew the signs. But never, not once, had he imagined seeing it in someone like her. Her kind were supposed to be unbreakable. That was what he had been told since the first day of the war. He had been told they did not fear, that they were made for violence, that their hearts were cold machines that beat only for conquest. But she was trembling now, not because she was weak, but because she had carried too much for too long. Slowly, carefully, he let his hand move. At first, he rested it only on the sheet, near her shoulder, letting her feel the weight of his presence without touch. She stiffened, her body reacting with instinct. But then she let out a long breath as if giving permission without words. His hand lowered. Gently, he placed it on her shoulder. Her trembling grew sharper for a heartbeat, then softened. The small, fragile sound of her breath filled the space between them. It was uneven, almost broken. And then, at last, she spoke. Her voice cracked the silence, raw and quiet, barely more than a whisper. Please, just don't let go. The words pierced through him like a blade. Not because they were strange, not because they came from an enemy, but because they were so human. How many times had he wanted to say those same words? How many nights had he wished there was someone beside him, someone to hold on to, someone to keep the crushing silence of war away? He had never spoken them, never dared. But now, from the mouth of someone he had been told to hate, those words reached him as if they had been waiting for him all along. His chest tightened. His throat ached. He had no answer, no clever reply. Words were too small. So he simply tightened his hold on her. Not roughly, not with force. Just enough to tell her the truth. That he wasn't going anywhere. That, for this moment at least, she was safe. Her body responded instantly. The trembling slowed like a storm finally calming after too much rage. She pressed her face closer against his chest, her breath warming the fabric of his shirt. The tension that had kept her stiff for so long melted away, piece by piece, until she lay against him fully, her weight trusting him, her fear resting on him. The war outside still roared. The ship still shook. Alarm still cried out in the distance. But here, beneath the sheets, her whispered plea changed everything. He realized then that what lay between them was not surrender. It was not betrayal. It was not weakness. It was something far stronger. It was trust. Trust was the one thing the war could not create. Trust was the one thing orders could not force, and yet somehow she had given it to him, with nothing but trembling shoulders and a broken whisper. He looked down at her, at the alien who should have been his enemy, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Something dangerous. Something fragile. Hope. He closed his eyes and let the word burn in his chest. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know if they would both survive the night. But he knew this. He would not let go. Not of her. Not of this moment. Not of the fragile humanity that still lived inside both of them. And as her breathing grew steady in his arms, he finally understood. Even in war, even in hatred, even in darkness, two trembling souls could find each other. And in that meeting, something greater than survival could be born. The night stretched on, heavy and endless. Outside his quarters, the war continued to scream. Sirens wailed through the corridors, sharp and merciless, each one announcing danger. The deep rumble of cannons echoed through the hull, shaking the walls like an angry heartbeat. Somewhere far away, soldiers ran, shouted, and fought. But inside his room there was only stillness. Two figures lay together under a thin sheet, pressed close not because of desire, but because of survival. The world beyond the walls demanded death and fire. But here, in this fragile bubble, life was holding on. He kept his arms around her. His hand rested lightly against her back, feeling the slow rise and fall of her breaths. She had stopped trembling now. Her body was warm against his, her head nestled just beneath his chin, her strange hair brushing softly against his skin. Every time the ship shook, he expected her to pull away, to stiffen again, to fall back into fear. But she didn't. Each tremor only made her hold tighter. Each alarm only pushed her closer. And he held her just as firmly, as if his arms alone could protect her from the fire waiting outside. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a soldier. He did not feel like a weapon. He felt human. He felt like a man holding another soul, shielding her not with orders but with something far older than war. The need to protect, the need to comfort, the need to be more than just a killer. His thoughts wandered as the minutes passed. He thought of the friends he had lost, the brothers and sisters who never made it back from battle. He thought of the hollow bunks that lined the barracks, once filled with laughter, now only ghosts. He thought of how war stripped everything away until all that was left was silence and grief. And now, here was something different, something alive. She was breathing in his arms. She was real. She was proof that the universe was not only war, proof that even across the divide of blood and hatred, there could still be connection. He opened his eyes slightly, looking at her face in the red glow of the emergency lights. She was not what he expected her to be. Her features were sharp, almost strange, but softened by the vulnerability that sleep, or something close to it, had brought. Her kind had always been shown to him as terrifying, monstrous, merciless. But right now, she looked nothing like that. She looked tired and beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with shape or form, but with truth. For a moment, he wondered if she had anyone left. Did she have comrades she had lost? Did she have friends buried under the stars? Did her people tell her lies the same way his people told him? Did she believe them, until something inside her broke and sent her searching for something better? He would never know, not unless she chose to tell him. But he knew one thing. She had chosen him. Out of everyone, she had slipped into his quarters. Out of everyone, she had stripped away her armor before him. Out of everyone, she had asked him not to let go. And he would not. The night dragged on. The alarms never fully stopped, only rose and fell like a tide of chaos. But inside his room, inside the narrow space of his bunk, there was no war. Only two lives breathing in rhythm, wrapped in silence, defying everything the universe demanded of them. His eyes grew heavy, but he refused to close them fully. He stayed awake, watching, guarding, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in all the galaxy. Not because she was an alien, not because she was his enemy, but because she was alive. And that was enough. At some point, her breathing steadied into the slow, soft rhythm of rest. He listened to it, let it guide him, let it calm the storm inside his own chest. The night outside was fire and steel. The night inside was fragile peace. And as the hours passed, he realized that this contrast, this fragile, impossible contrast, was the most human thing he had felt in years. The war could rage outside. The universe could burn. But here, in the quiet of his room, in the safety of her arms around him, he had found something the war could not touch. Something worth living for. The night ended slowly. First came silence. The cannons stopped, the alarms faded, and the ship's violent shaking calmed into stillness. Then came the low hum of engines, steady and constant, carrying the vessel through space as if nothing had happened. Warships always survived like this, battered, scarred, but moving forward as though survival itself was the only victory worth claiming. He woke to the silence. His eyes opened, heavy with exhaustion. The room was dim, still painted in red light. For a moment he thought it had all been a dream, her shadow slipping into his quarters, the sound of armor falling to the floor, the warmth of her trembling body beneath his sheets. But then he turned and his chest tightened. Her side of the bed was empty. The sheet lay flat. still warm from her presence. But she was gone. He sat up slowly, his hands pressing against the mattress where she had been. It was real. She had been there. The warmth was proof. The faint scent of her skin in the air was proof. The scattered pieces of her clothes and armor on the floor, left behind in silence, were proof. He lowered his head into his hands, unsure what to feel. Relief? Fear? Loss? Part of him had expected this. She had come in silence, so it was only natural she would leave in silence too. She had given him her fear for one night, her trust for one fragile moment, and then she had gone back to the war that still waited outside these walls. But another part of him had hoped she would still be here when the silence came, hoped she would stay, even when the alarm stopped, hoped that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just one night, but the beginning of something neither of them had dared to dream of. He looked down at the sheets again. Empty. And then he saw it. On the pillow beside his own, scratched in clumsy handwriting, was a single word. The letters were uneven, shaky, written in standard as if she had struggled to shape each one. But they were clear enough. Hope. The word struck him harder than any explosion, harder than any wound. His chest ached as he read it, again and again. Hope. It was such a small word, but it carried more weight than a fleet of warships. In that word, she had given him more than comfort. She had given him a weapon stronger than steel, stronger than fire, stronger than all the hate that had filled the stars for so long. He sat there staring at it until his vision blurred. He blinked hard, fighting back the sting in his eyes. Soldiers were not supposed to cry, but he was not just a soldier now. He was human, and humans bled from the heart as much as the body. He rose from the bed, his legs unsteady, and crossed the room. The armor and cloth she had shed still lay scattered on the floor. He crouched and picked up one piece, a small plate of alien alloy, curved and sharp. It was light in his hands, but he remembered how heavy it had sounded when she dropped. It wasn't armor anymore. It was memory. It was proof that someone, even from the other side of the war, had trusted him enough to let go of her defenses. He set the piece gently back down and turned toward the door. The corridor beyond was still alive with movement. Soldiers, rushing to stations, engineers repairing damage, officers shouting orders. The war was not over. It would not be over for a long time. But something inside him had changed. He had gone to sleep as a soldier, nothing more than a weapon with a beating heart. He woke as something else. He woke with a word burned into him, written not only on the pillow but inside his chest. Hope. He would fight again. He would bleed again. He might even die before this war ended. But he would not forget her. He would not forget the way she had slipped beneath his sheets, trembling yet brave, and whispered the most human words he had ever heard. Please don't let go. He would carry those words with him. He would carry that trust, that fragile night, that one impossible connection between enemies. And he would fight not just for victory, not just for orders, but for something greater. For hope. And in that moment, he understood something the war could never take from him. Humanity was not just survival. Humanity was the ability to hold another soul in the dark and choose to protect it. Humanity was the courage to trust. Humanity was the stubborn belief that even in endless war, peace could be born in silence. He pressed a hand against the door. It slid open with a hiss. The ship carried him back into the war, but he carried something the war could not break. Her word. Hope.